Today we're going to use this pictograph to answer some questions. We can see that our pictograph is about boxes of apples sold at Fred's Fruits, and we need to look at what the key tells us. The key tells us that one apple represents 20 boxes. So every apple we see represents 20 boxes of apples that were sold at Fred's Fruits. And we can look down the left side and see that the first line is January and February. The second line is March and April, then May and June, etc. So this pictograph shows us a year worth of sales of boxes of apples at Fred's Fruits. And our question asks us how many boxes of apples were sold in January and February. Now we can see again that the first line is January and February. They're already combined for us. We just have to count how many apples that would be. So we can look and see that in January and February we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 apples in our pictograph. But that doesn't mean that we sold 8 boxes of apples. Each apple represents 20 boxes. So we're going to think about counting by twos when we count by 20s. So our first apple represents 20. When we count the next one, we would be at 40. 20 more would be 60. Think of the twos pattern, 2, 4, 6, 8, 20, 40, 60, 80. 20 more would be 100. 20 more would be 120, 140, 160. So in January and February, 160 boxes of apples were sold at Fred's Fruits. Here's another question using the same pictograph. How many boxes of apples were sold in March and April? Well, we already know we can just count by 20s, but notice we have this half of an apple right here. That doesn't represent 20 boxes. If it's half of an apple, it represents half of 20 boxes. So half of 20 is 10. So this apple represents 10 boxes. So we can start at the beginning and count by 20s, just like we did for January, February, 20, 40, 60, 80. But then we don't need to add another 20 on. We just need to add on 10. So 20, 40, 60, 80, and 10 more would be 90. So in March and April, 90 boxes of apples were sold. How many more boxes of apples were sold in the first half of the year than in the second half? What do we think that means? The first half of the year. Well, if we look again at the labels on the left side of our pictograph, we can see we have January, February, March, April, all the way through December. So our pictograph shows one full year. And we're asked how many more boxes of apples were sold in the first half of the year than in the second half. So half of the year would be half of this pictograph. January, February, March, April, May, June. That's the first 6 months of the year, or the first half of the year. Then July, August, September, October, November, December. That would be the second half of the year. So now we need to figure out, if we're trying to compare them, we're trying to compare the first half of the year to the second half of the year, we have to start by knowing how many boxes of apples were sold in each half of the year. So in the first half of the year, we need to figure out how many boxes of apples were sold. So here's the first half. How many were sold in January and February? Well, we figured that out already. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 140, 160. So there's January and February. How about March and April? We just did that. 20, 40, 60, 80, and 10 more is 90. And then we need May and June, which we haven't done yet. But we've already figured out how to count these, so we just need to count by 20s. remembering the pattern of counting by twos to help us. 20, 40, 60. So in the first half of the year, we can add these up to see how many boxes of apples were sold in the first half of the year. 0 plus 0 plus 0 is 0. I like to look for doubles or for ways to make a 10 when I'm adding several numbers. And I know the double 6 plus 6 is 12. 12 plus 9 is 21. I'm going to regroup my 2. 2 plus 1 is 3. So in the first half of the year, 310 boxes of apples were sold. Can we answer the question yet? We can't. We still have to know the second half of the year. So let's start by looking at July and August. 20, 40 boxes of apples were sold. Now September, October. 20, 40, 60, 80 boxes of apples were sold. Now we're going to watch out for November and December because we have this half down here. 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120. But what do we add on for this half? Good, we add on 10 because half of 20 is 10. So 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 120, 130. We add on 130 for November and December. Now we can add these three numbers to find out how many boxes of apples were sold in the second half of the year. 0 plus 0 plus 0, that's 0. 4 plus 8 is 12, plus 3 more is 15. Regroup my 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Have I answered my question yet? I know how many boxes of apples were sold in the first half of the year. I know how many boxes of apples were sold in the second half of the year. But I'm asked how many more were sold in the first half than in the second half. I'm asked to compare these two numbers. So I'm going to subtract 310 were sold in the first half minus the 250 which were sold in the second half. Will tell me how many more boxes were sold in the first half of the year than in the second half of the year. So we have 0 minus 0. Be careful right here. If I have 1 of anything, I cannot subtract 5 of something from that. I need to shift over a 10, and this 1 becomes 11. So I have 11 minus 5 is 6. 2 minus 2 is 0. So the answer to my question is 60 more boxes were sold in the first half of the year than in the second half of the year.